problem. We are so happy to welcome our Ithaca College senior writers. These projects that they're going to be reading excerpts of are the culmination of their senior year writing projects. So I'd like to thank the chair of the department of the writing department at IC, Eleanor Henderson, and Barbara Adams for making this happen. And finally, Community Arts Partnership. So our first reader will be Nora Marcus-Hecht, who's a writing major, and after college is going to work for Buffalo Street Books. So let's give it a warm welcome.
Thanks, Caleb. Hi, everyone. For my senior project, I spent the semester working on a collection of essays about my experience with Judaism in America, specifically surrounding Jewish stereotypes in the media. And today I have two kind of shorter essays. This first one is the introduction to the entire collection of essays. It's called Picture This. Picture being 6 years old, not knowing much about the world. You're bouncing around in your car seat as your parents pull into a spot in the Seneca Street parking garage. As the door is open for you and your little legs hop onto the crumbling ground, dark gray smudges from the garage tainting your white tights, you ask the question that's been on your mind since watching Hyman Kristofsky's Simpsons debut. You say, "Mama, what's a rabbi?" Your sister laughs, and even as your parents explain what a rabbi is, your foggy mind refuses to listen. You wouldn't actually learn what being a rabbi means until you're at least 10 years old. Picture being 13. You've been feeling weird about your friend group lately. Luna has taken to calling you names like whorebag and dumb bitch, out of love, you think. Mary has always been awful to you, but you were drawn to her because she seemed like she would be a good support system. Someone you would want to have on your side. She's cool, listens to badass music, and she has a mean face that no one wants to mess with. You're sitting in homeroom with these two when Mrs. Friedman, your Jewish social studies teacher, asks you to help her escort Roald Hoffman, the Holocaust survivor who's coming into class that day around school. You're honored. You smile at the thought of doing such a service for someone whose experience is the culmination of what you believe it means to be Jewish. Luna and Mary laugh at your reaction. Of course, she asked you, you're a Jew after all. Something about their tone doesn't sound right, but you laugh with them anyway. Try to remember what it's like being 6 on your first day at cultural school. You don't think you've ever been in a room with so many other Jewish children. It's hard to picture what that day was like. So many faces you can't remember. There was a guy with a yarmulke and a guitar, or was that 2 years later when you were in class with the older kids? Those early years blend together for you. You don't remember much of anything about them, and that really sucks. You'll eventually find out that the only reason your parents signed you up for classes at Kol Haverim was because they knew you wanted that sort of religious community. But you still didn't get it from there, did you? Picture being 10. It's your first year competing with your dance studio. It's costume day, which everyone says is like second Christmas. Your family celebrates both Christmas and Hanukkah, so you can laugh along with this joke and feel like you're a part of something. You try on your costumes, your mother kvetches about how much money cheap rhinestones and sequins cost. She emailed Miss Shauna 2 nights before to let her know that your congregation was having their Passover Seder that day, and that you would need to leave costume day early. Shauna never responds, and your mother takes you to services anyway. The other girls tell you the next day that you missed so much. Why did you leave? Shauna's really mad. You're in the back for the next formation because of it. You'll never miss dance class for another Jewish holiday again. Picture being 21. You're finally of legal drinking age, but you're in London right now, so it doesn't even matter. Sitting in a pub with your friends, Alex, who is already 3 beers in, looks at you and the other 2 Jews sitting at the table. Wouldn't it be funny if Jews just weren't real, he asks. And the 3 of you laugh because it is funny. You haven't laughed at a Jew joke like that since Charlottesville, and you've missed laughing at your own identity without feeling shitty for it. Jews aren't real becomes one of the many inside jokes you continue laughing about months after you return to the States. Picture being 14 the morning of your slightly too late bat mitzvah. Better late than never, you keep telling yourself. You're stressed, your mom is stressed. Everyone seems to be stressed except for your sister, who doesn't care and didn't have a bat mitzvah herself. You cry in the shower that morning, but you still tell everyone that it was the greatest day of your life. Picture being 11 years old at an amusement park with two of your best friends from your studio. You're standing in line waiting to get a serving of cookie dough Dippin' Dots when Maddie says something about God. The first thing you say, like the atheist your parents raised you to be, is, "I don't believe in God," and she hits you with her jacket. The zipper lashes your eye and you start to tear up, but you're more surprised than upset. She tells you to never say that again, and you do. She hits you again. When you tell Sarah what happened, she looks at you with glassy, heartbroken eyes. "Why don't you believe in God?" The only answer you have is that Jews don't believe in God because that's what you were taught Judaism is, religion without the religion. You're still 11, and you're ashamed to admit that sometimes you do pray to God. You're worried that your dad and sister will be disappointed. You know your mom will never be upset with you for praying, but you're scared that the Christian subliminal messaging that you got from dancing at shamans has seeped into your head, and that your family will think you're rejecting your culture. You want to be Christian. You've spent nights wishing you were like everyone else at your school and at dance who went to church on Sundays and said grace before dinner. You wish you were normal like them. Judaism doesn't feel normal to you. Not when you're lighting the menorah, not when you're in social studies learning about the Holocaust, not when most of the people in the audience at your bat mitzvah aren't Jewish and they're nearly falling asleep just waiting for it to be over. A party. That's what they came here for. And the 45-minute service you've been prepping for 2 years feels like a waste of time when one of your friends asks when she'll be able to take a sip of the manischewitz you promised her. Picture being 20, and for the first time, you realize that you love your ethnicity. That realization hits you upside the head. You've gone so long hating yourself for being a secular Jew. You hate the gross-sounding ch that's in every other Hebrew word. You hate that you don't have a religious figure you believe in. You hate that you can't feel safe around your friends without making fun of your own identity. You hate that Judaism has exposed you to so much anger and hatred. You hate that you're hated. You are hated. You are hated by so many people just for existing, just for being alive. When a family from your congregation drops off a gift bag filled with apples, honey, and challah for your Zoom Rosh Hashanah service, you take a bite out of the honey cake. You can feel the love and gratitude poured into the pastry, love for the new year, love for the community, love for Judaism. You wish you felt that Jewish love sooner. I have a second shorter piece. This is something that I started writing not during the senior project, but after I went on Birthright, which is a very Jewish experience. This is not a complete piece. What I'll be reading is the very beginning and the very end of this essay. And I do want to give a quick content warning. Some of the imagery in here is it's a little rough. It is about the Holocaust. So if that's something that you think might be an issue for you, I will not be offended if you get up and leave. This is titled Yad Vashem. In 1932, Rabbi Akiva Posner took a photograph of his menorah on the windowsill in his study in Kiel, Germany. Across the street, looking out the window, was a Nazi flag hanging right above the candle holder. Rabbi Posner took a photograph before putting the menorah out of sight and turned that image into a postcard. His wife, Rachel Mansbach, wrote in German on the back of the postcard, "Judea dies, thus saith the banner, Judea will live forever, thus responds the light. Light will always outshine darkness." As I entered the final room of the museum, I gasped at the sight before me. Image after image of dead men and women and children were smiling at me from the dome-like ceiling. Along the sides of the cylindrical room were the known names of 4 million Jews who died during the Holocaust, and beside that was a gap for the 2 million we will never be able to uncover. In the center of the room was a handrail protecting us from the 30-foot drop below, designed to mimic the pits that naked Jewish bodies fell into after being shot and covered in lime for easy decomposition. Looking down into the pit, I could see the faces above me reflected back. Looking down even further, I could see my own face among them. I clutched the hamsa around my neck out of fear that the clasp would break and fall down and I would be left without anything to protect me. When we finally left the building, I smelled the air thick with rain and trees and hopelessness. Our tour guide ended with a statistic. Before the war, there were 16 million Jews in the army alone. Now there are 14 million Jews in the world today. How many would there be if the Holocaust never happened? 50 million? 60 million? Caitlin handed me a tissue from her pocket, and I cried on her shoulder until I was out of breath. Those photographs were still burned into my memory. The image of that older woman, skin and bones, lying in her hospital bed, the electric shocks yet to kill her, although she was barely alive as it was. The image of that ugly young man in his paper white skin and thick black hair and the butt of a bullet tearing his unibrow in two. The image of the woman looking back at me from the pit, the woman who could have been my mother's sister, they looked so similar. I was so caught up in my thoughts and in my memory, in the collective Jewish memory, that I almost didn't see the golden hour light reflecting on the old city as it stared back at us from Mount Zion. Judea dies, thus saith the banner. Judea will live forever, thus responds the light. Thank you.
Very moving, Nora. And now we'll move on to Julia Dath, who's a writing major and an English and screenwriting minor. And over the summer, she will be interning at the Special Sales and Grassroots Marketing team. She'll be reading her excerpt from her science fiction story on feminism. I'll give it up for Julia.
Hi. Okay, so I really love outer space. I've loved it my whole life, and I've always dreamed of writing a story about women on spaceships because I think there need to be more books about women on spaceships. So this is an excerpt from the beginning of my senior project, which is a story about a young woman who is set to take over a very large political dynasty when she runs away and meets a girl on the very opposite side of the class spectrum. So it's about revolution, it's about how the different power structures affect our personal relationships, and it's about spaceships. So here's the beginning. A burst of light, a wavering grip. Two hands lurched forward, pupils blown wide, within an inch of success. And then blood, blood on the tongue. A sharp cuts with splattered salt. The taste of it beckoned more. Hunger unfurled in the gut, claiming the body. Aboard the command of a Class 1 superior tracking ship, a sharp-toothed humanoid woman, native of the planet Urbane and resident of its satellite orbiter, the galactic powerful Silver City, bowed her head from behind the dash and let a small hiss escape through the gaps in her angled teeth. It was one thing to be on the trail, to pull tighter and tighter on the cord with a sense of imminent success. But now they had lost the tether, and the Class 1 superior transport ship, carrying the Alrion of the divine Natane dynasty, had shot into the trackless expanse of liminal space, where on the other end they would be untraced. Lost. Really, Scaff did not know how to lose anything. Not possessions, not information, not people. She'd had an eye on Taliesin Natane for the last 18 years, had watched the Alrion of the most powerful family in the allied interplanetary system stumble to balance on 2 feet, had tracked her as she bobbled through the halls of the grandest Silver City buildings, and had disdained as she scraped through lessons on loyalty, dignity, and diplomacy. Taliesin Natane was not fit to take the heaviest mantle in the galaxy, but that wasn't what bothered Scaff. The girl could be mediocre all she wanted, but Scaff would never lose. For several moments, the ship remained silent, waiting, baited, for a direction to take the chase. We've got the numbers on the only unaccounted ship. Would you like to put a warning out? Scaff's lips curled upward. It had been a long time since she'd lost trait on a fleeing ship, and the pit of shame it had opened within her had been raw and wide. But with so much success seemed she'd forgotten how gratifying it was to turn things around. It made the hunt all the more satisfying. Indeed. It only took mere minutes after that. She had trained her people well, and when something was a priority, nothing else mattered. Scaff looked down at the screen for the information scan of the planet where a royal ship had just come into orbit. Some planet called Salachar, a forest planet producing mainly silver silk, a center of trade for the more desolate planets of the allied interplanetary system, completely unremarkable, so dull, so meaningless to the system as a whole, that she could not remember the last time she had heard the name spoken in her years of serving on the empiric detail. If there was such a thing as pity that the woman could feel, it perhaps twinged in her for the residents of Salachar. They had unknowingly just become arbor to the system's most wanted fugitive, and the ruthless Really Scaff, respected marshal of the galactic detail, with her pockets itching for the weight that would befall them with success, would spare no feeling at ravaging little Salachar to retrieve the Albion. The chase was on. In the dwindling heat of the day's seventh and final song, young Sanaa of Port Kildare licked the brass lining of her bowl for any final scraps of sustenance. It was the last meal she would eat until the fourth sun broke tomorrow, and her tongue scraped along the rounded metal vestibule over and over again, even when the bowl was dry. From here, everything looked still, and she felt part of a living picture. Between the final sun and the first of the 3 moons was the most peaceful time of day, just after she'd returned home with her meal and, once the rain months had passed, could perch upon a large flat stone to watch the flickering stalks of hollylight and large ash trees around her cabin. The other texts did not understand why Sanaa had taken up residence outside of Port Kildare. Well, technically, she was registered as an additional resident at Nina's place, though Sanaa had never actually stepped a toe in the door. It was, perhaps, sensible to keep residents quite close to Udu's garage like Nina, but then Sanaa would spend her nights blocking out the sounds of rancorous drinkers spilling out of tap rooms, and Nina wailing loud songs in old tongues from far-off moons. Sanaa preferred the silence of the trees around her. Nothing ever talked back out here, but from the flat rock her view of the orange-changing sky was much more magnificent than anything she would see from a window in port. It was unchallenged by jetting ships or the facades of large buildings. And after the loss of Huron 2 years ago, she wanted nothing more to do with that wretched port at all, and wished these trees could be all she saw. Some days the place was filled with shadow memories, Huron turning a corner or showing up to Udu's with some spare meal portions and refusing to say where he'd nicked them from. Sanaa squashed those memories with her brother the best she could. Thinking about Huron made the food rise in her gut, and she had to take steady breaths not to waste the meal by spitting it up on the moon rock. If Sanaa could stay in these woods forever, she would. But there'd be no portions, and she wouldn't be able to pay her dues to the dynasty, which was the last worry that she needed. As the seventh sun finished its descent, Sanaa wandered back to her modified cabin, which she'd retrofitted from defunct interior ship repair kits that Udu trashed. Her bed was a makeshift accommodation table from a Class 4 standard freighter transport, and she'd gotten the drip purification system from a Class 4 commercial shuttle. Dangling in the entryway were stars, carved out of old shipping scrap hung from thin curling wires, her own little piece of the sky in an otherwise dark metal box in the woods. Ships were Sanaa's whole life, though not in the conventional way that many in the system saw them. She'd never worked a contract on a freighter, never made money or the desire to travel off-world, and certainly didn't have the training to be any sort of pilot or flight crew. For Sanaa, ships were food, they were currency. Her nimble hands could tame them and heal them. Her days were spent poking at their underbellies and decoding the purpose of their ever-appearing groans. For a girl who had never left Salachar, and one who had grown up a grounded drifter at that, to have so much knowledge about system ships was unconventional. Sanaa had always been fascinated by ships. Without them, there would be no allied interplanetary system, no connection between places and moons and stations, no Silver City, no dynasty. Ships changed everything. That's why when Sanaa was 13, she begged Udu for a job after spending years watching him and his text repair ships that stopped in Port Kildare. Udu hired her, saying that small arms could reach little parts, but Sanaa secretly thought the man was just being kind to a drifterkin in town, giving her some way to support herself. 4 years later, she was Udu's top tech, so his investment had clearly paid off. Just before day's end, Udu had asked Sanaa to arrive at work before the arrival of the first sun. The rest of the techs came in around the second sun, so she wasn't quite sure why her boss was making her get up so early. Still, she'd agreed, because extra cash was extra cash, and Udu's place was one of those in town that wasn't exactly above board about all practices. Sanaa's reported salary to the planet's arbiter was a tad less than her real income, because not all of Ubu's clients and projects were of an official nature. Sanaa had worked on everything from vintage fighter jets to retrofitting a Class 1 superior tracking ship with stealth technology under less than legal circumstances, but those jobs kept her fed. Ubu trusted Sanaa to keep her mouth shut, and she did. That's it.
Thank you so much, Julia. Our next writer is Mathew Gardener, who is a writing major and graphic design minor. And they will be presenting their multimedia piece today. And over the summer, they will be at a technical writing company, Prof. Eval, as an intern. So let's give it up for Mathew Gardener. We can start passing around his multimedia.
So for my senior project, I initially started off working on a fiction piece, but in the end that wasn't the right fit. But a lot of the ideas about dimensionality and space and time that were really interesting in Dath kind of led me to work on a number of small projects related to those ideas. So the one that I'm sharing today is called Skim Milk, and it is an essay about milk cartons and how they're made on a milk carton. Yeah, a little bit later, there will be like some parts that kind of refer to some of the images. I'll do my best to just kind of describe them as I read it. But I'll begin. A milk carton puts its best face forward, designed to entice. But rotate 90 degrees, and you will read it differently. Nutrition facts, ingredients, and claims of additives absent, making implicit arguments about purity and taste. The remaining sides of the carton bridge these two rhetorical modes, striking a balance between appealing visuals and claims about the contents of the carton. Each side affects a different experience, together describing how the milk is to be used, how it is the perfect pairing for breakfast, how it strengthens the body, how it is sustainably produced. The commercial object demands different reading depending on its orientation. By occupying 3D space, its entirety cannot be experienced at once. A reader must lift the object, rotate it, advertisement, nutritional claims, corporate bulletin. In a busy marketplace, the carton speaks not just of its contents, but of its context, implying that the corporate producer or packager of a product holds values that the consumer can relate to, and that in turn, these values speak to the quality of the product on view. The reading experience is further altered in other less obvious ways. The weight of the carton, its coolness to the touch, each forging a personal connection against the sensory clutter of the supermarket. When we read a milk carton, what can we truly know about what's inside? What relation does the vessel have to its contents? Milk is represented in the supermarket in the consumer sphere by a membrane of paper and plastic. How different are these materials? Paper, damp, flex, stiff, marked, and milk, fluid, uniform, motile. When we take a sheet of paper in our hands, we can see both its sides. We think of it as being two-sided, whereas a 3D object or fluid has an additional inside past its surface that we cannot directly see. Paper, in the real world, does occupy 3D space, but we don't treat it as such. The experience of interacting with paper is the experience of interacting with two dimensions. The experience of interacting with a carton, with contents, with 3. Mathematically, a sphere describes not a 3D bulk, but a surrounding plane, or surface. It is like one continuously curved sheet of paper, a 2D surface defining a 3D mass, a soap bubble, not a ball bearing. The sphere, surface, and ball, volume, are represented differently, inherently related to one another, but mathematically distinct. The difference is visceral. Experiencing the world in 3D, we cannot perceive the inside of the ball, nor the interior of a drop of milk. There is something closed, hidden in their nature. A milk carton, the entire object is text, is an attempt to make the reader conceive of the sloshing bulk within, to assign quality and value to it, to visualize it before turning the tap or prying the spout from before the top. Any 2D representation of a 3D object must discard some information. We're used to representing a cube, for instance, as a pair of squares offset diagonally and joined at the corner. This representation prefers a suggestion of perspective and depth over an accurate shape. This drawing has a kind of graph, which can be abstracted further, demonstrating that all it preserves are points and edges. Another representation of a cube is its neck, a flat form that can be folded and sealed into its 3D shape. Right there. And that depicts the 2D faces of a 3D object, but it contains no inherent information about the connection between faces. one can only discover them through the act of folding. That's formed the basis of the first paper milk cartons developed in the United States at the turn of the 20th century. In 1929, the American Paper Bottle Company acquired the trademarks and patents for Pure Pak, the prototype of the now plastic milk carton, and began selling packaging equipment to U.S. dairies. Machines would fold paper nets, called blanks, along pre-scored lines, close the bottoms, dip them in paraffin wax, fill them with milk, and finally heat seal and staple them closed. The original Pure Pak carton's top seam, peaked like a gable roof, could be peeled open to make a convenient spout. And unlike a true geometric net, the physical blanks required a tab where the material overlaps itself, allowing the carton to be sealed closed into a 3D form. This blank-based method dominated the packaging world for decades. But one milk carton took a different approach. Swedish industrialist Ruben Rausing sought to improve paper cartons, frustrated by the uneven filling that resulted from the milk frothing as it filled carton blanks. His solution? To continuously fill milk into packing material and seal it off around each unit. Corporate history claims that the process revealed itself to Rausing as he watched his wife making sausages. Other sources note that his employee Eric Wallenberg perfected the geometric form of the new vessel in 1944. The result was Tetra Pak, a futuristic tetrahedral carton that looks like it came out of the Jetsons rather than the Swedish supermarkets in the 1950s. Being blank-fed, Tetra Pak machines use a roll of paper on which a carton's design was printed. The paper is unspooled and lofted over 10 feet in the air, allowing the paper to be curled into a long vertical tube around a metal nozzle. The paper tube is sealed off along its edge and filled with milk. At the very bottom of the machine, metal jaws seal off each carton through the milk at alternate 90-degree angles. The net of the resulting shape is hard to depict on a flat plane. The perpendicular seals, spaced along the cylinder, form a tetrahedron with no scoring necessary. The tetrahedron is the simplest polyhedron, just 4 points that allow it to poke into 3D space. It doesn't seem to lie quite flat in the way that a rectangular box does. One can imagine the bizarre look of a traditional pantry stocked with these form-bending packages, a collection of objects that refuse orderly storage. Ruben Rausing was born in 1895 in Rå, a large fishing village outside Helsingborg, Sweden, where the average Swede lived on the edge of what would be seen today as extreme poverty. Most households did not have running water, much less electricity, and the average person survived on the equivalent of $8 a day. Average life expectancy was just over 50 years, shorter than any country today, indicating a high rate of child mortality and low access to quality medical care. By the time Rausing was a young man studying at Columbia University in the United States, he'd already seen drastic socioeconomic change in his home country. However, by the 1920s, Americans were already making twice as much as their Swedish counterparts. The economic transformation brought by industrialization began earlier and proceeded much more dramatically in the United States. Rausing was studying in a country that was, on average, twice as rich as his own. It's no wonder then that Rausing idolized efficiency and economic competition. He saw increases in public health and quality of life spurred by a pre-depression U.S. economy and anticipated similar changes in Sweden. In American self-service groceries, a novelty at that time, he would have seen an explosion of prepackaged foods, including early paper milk cartons. Later, he would found Sweden's first commercial food packager, eventually funding the development of the iconic Tetra Pak. To confine any experience in any medium, information must be discarded. Writing, derived from the spoken word, presents its ideas in sequence, removing the simultaneous perception that occurs when taking in a view. Painting, by contrast, lacks the precision of diction that poetry provides, achieving its effect through accumulation and tone. Tetra Pak did not become economically successful or expand beyond the Swedish market until the 1960s with the release of the Tetra Brick, a rectangular carton the size and shape of a masonry brick, but formed from the same cylinder of paper as Tetra Pak, albeit with a more complex folding sequence aided by pre-scored rolls of paper. However, it's no surprise that MoMA chose the Tetra Pak over this commercial success when curating an exhibition of everyday objects that are indispensable masterpieces of design, deserving our admiration. It is rare to find an object that so deeply captures the liminal experience of dimensionality. The Tetra Pak carton begins as a scroll, a one-dimensional flow of 2D paper, filled and folded into a 3D form. Linear text announcing Tetra Pak as part of a planar image enveloping a volume of fluid within. When the clamps press through the column of milk, they impress and deform the 3D shape. The seams a buzzing connection point where the boundary between 2D membrane and 3D volume blows. The packages tumble out of the machine, with modern models producing over 15,000 packages per hour, as if poured like milk from a giant spout. Hold it, turn it, let it pass through space, let it deform. let its form be.
All right, thank you so much, Matthew. Our final writer is Collin Ryer. They are a writing major and history minor at Ithaca College, and they'll be reading an excerpt from their coming-of-age novel. Let's give it up for Collin Ryer.
Hello. This is a piece that I've been working on in one form or another. It started as a series of doodles since I was 11, and I'm 21 now, so it's been about 10 years. And this is part of what I have. So this is from a section of the story I call Tell an Adult. When the leaves were turning orange, Bailey came home from a walk to find her parents arguing on the back deck. She ducked down so they wouldn't see her, muddy at the tree line. I catch a few words, like responsibility and ugly, from Lori. George is harder to hear, but I can make out the calm down tone of his voice. So Bailey snuck a bit closer, picking her way along the side of the deck just under them. I bet she won't even like it, Lori said. She hates half the shit we do for her. She'll like him, said George. Wouldn't you? I don't like it, actually, Lori snapped, and Bailey heard the tap, tap, tap of her foot on the deck. It's going to piss in my house. What are they talking about? Bailey craned her neck, trying to look over the edge of the deck, but before she could reach, a tiny dog poked its head over the side of the deck and looked straight down at Bailey. Tightly curled white fur framed two huge black eyes and a button nose, and two floppy ears that perked towards Bailey. They did not get me a dog. The little thing barked a shrill, narrow little bark. Its stubby tail wagged furiously as it looked down at her. George and Lori appeared over the side of the deck a few seconds later. Lori threw up her hands when she saw Bailey looking up at her. Here we go, she said, turning away, and Bailey heard the sliding door into the house open and slam. The dog jumped at the sound. Don't worry, she scares me too. Bailey reached up a hand and the dog reached down to sniff her fingers. Bailey shivered as its wet nose passed over her knuckles and reached up another hand so the dog could sniff that one as well. It snuffed at each of her fingers, barked again, and took off in a little circle around the deck. Did you get me a dog? Bailey asked George. He'd watched the interaction like a statue, as if worried he'd break the spell. Did you like him? George asked. Bailey peeked over the edge of the deck. The dog was running in tight circles, yipping at the fall air. Said Bailey. I don't know. But I do George a favor and I like the dog on a trial basis. I named it Bunny, which Lori thinks is stupid and I think is funny. George sets up a little bed with some food and water in the basement, along with a little doggy door he can use to do his business. We don't have a fenced-in yard, but Bunny doesn't go far. I think he's scared to be alone, so that makes two of us. He does follow me into the woods when I harness him up with his little red leash and trail him to the walking path. Bunny's favorite thing about walks becomes the opportunity to ruin his white fur. He takes to mud and wet leaves and the unpacked dirt under rocks. I can let him off his leash without much worry. He pretty much sticks to me. I bring water and treats on all of our walks like George tells me to, and when Bunny gets too tired to walk home, I just toss him in my backpack and I bring him home that way. After a few weeks, Bunny pokes his head out of the backpack on the way home and rests it on my shoulder, watching the path ahead with half-closed eyes and growling in the back of his throat when a branch sways too quickly or a squirrel rustles alongside the road. And I figure I'll just go ahead and fall in love with Bunny. He makes it hard not to. It's fast. The same way I was fast to love Rachel and her friend Anne, and the same way I was fast to try and kill myself, but I guess I'm fast. By November 10th, the trees were nearly bare. Bailey had mittens on and a scarf wrapped up around her head. She bundled up Bunny in a little dog coat at her feet, and she was sticking to the path for once, even though she knew every tree and rock for a mile around. And that's when she first ran into Rachel and Anne. The two of them swept around a corner on bicycles and nearly ran Bailey off of the asphalt path. I almost didn't recognize them, because I haven't seen them in months, and I almost screamed once I did. They look different. Anne used to wear a lot of pink, but now she's wearing a bright green coat and a glittery blue scrunchie and a purple sweater and blue boots. She looks like a circus tent or a rainbow. And Rachel's wearing a huge coat. Her hair is cut short like a boy's, and she's wearing all gray and blue, like she doesn't even want to be seen. I wonder if I look different to them. I feel different, but I don't know if it shows. Anne twisted over her shoulder as she biked past. Cute dog, she called back. Wait, Bailey? And she swerved into the frosty dirt, tumbled off her bike into a pile. Rachel skidded to a halt and jumped onto the pavement, letting her bike hit the ground behind her. "Are you all right?" she called, running back towards where Anne had fallen. But Anne was on her feet before Rachel even got there, and she ran towards Bailey. "Bailey!" Anne shouted, her arms flung wide. Snow was smeared up her hair and her jacket on one side from where she'd fallen, but that didn't seem to bother Anne one bit as she crashed into Bailey and squeezed. "I missed you so much!" Bailey stood with her arms pinned to her side, eyes wide. She cracked a smile at Rachel, who was edging her way closer with her hands in oversized pockets. Rachel looked away, but only for a moment. She pried her head back towards Bailey and offered her own tight-lipped smile. "You really missed me?" Bailey looked between Rachel's tense expression and the back of the head Anne had buried in her shoulder. "Of course we did!" Anne pulled back and gripped Bailey by the arms, looking her up and down with bright eyes. "Your mom told my mom that you tried to kill yourself, and we didn't see you at school for a month, and now you're here and you have a little dog." Anne dropped to her knees and reached out for Bunny, but he growled and ducked between Bailey's legs. Anne backed up and grinned down at him. "Sweetie," she said, looking at the dog. She looked back at Bailey. "I knew you were alive, but Eric thought you were dead." "Eric? Who's Eric?" asked Bailey. Anne gasped and clapped her hands over her mouth. "Oh no," she said through her hand. She turned to look at Rachel. "I'm sorry." "No worries," Rachel said in a small voice. "Forget about it." "Why forget about it?" said Bailey. "Is that just some boy?" "No," said Anne through her hand. At the same time, Rachel said, "Yes." Bailey looked silly between them. "Okay," she said. "Cool." "I am messing everything up." Anne turned her wide eyes to Rachel, who looked as if she'd rather melt into the trees and vanish than continue this conversation. "They don't want to talk to me." "I was just walking," Bailey said. "I can keep walking if that's what you want." "How are you doing?" asked Anne, as if Bailey hadn't offered to leave. "Well, I'm sort of cold," said Bailey, "and I'm a bit confused." "I'm sorry," Rachel said in a thin voice. I didn't mean to confuse you. I can tell you the truth about it if you want." "Okay," said Bailey. "Is it just a boy? Like a boy you have a crush on or something?" "Ha!" Anne's laugh bounced off the bare tree trunks and reverberated back. Rachel flinched at the sound, but she smiled all the same. "Eric is me," Rachel said. She was edging closer to the two of them, casting little glances down at Bunny between Bailey's legs. "Anne calls me that when it's just us talking. It's sort of like a nickname?" said Bailey. Rachel, Eric, kicked the side of her shoe with her other foot. "Yeah, it's like a nickname, sort of." "Sort of?" Bailey said. She looked at Anne, who was watching the conversation with a grin. "I'm confused. Is it a secret?" "Sort of," said Rachel. "Why is it a secret?" asked Rachel. "Your nickname is Eric. That's not even a silly name." "It's a boy name," said Rachel. "I like boy stuff." "Like the short hair," said Bailey. Eric, Rachel, nodded slowly. "Is that okay?" she asked quietly. "Why the hell is she asking me?" "Yeah, it's fine," said Bailey. Sorry, but it's not really a big deal. I don't know why you're keeping it a secret. Are you a boy? Is that the secret?" Anne threw her arm around Bailey's shoulder and squeezed. "Bailey, you're cool," she said. "I am so confused right now," Bailey said. "Thank you. So are you." "I'm sort of a boy," said Eric. "Do you know what transgender is?" "No." "Then never mind," Eric said with a wave of his hand. "It's not important. Just don't tell people." "Yeah, no problem," said Bailey. She turned to look at Anne, who was still beaming between them. "You're not that good at keeping it a secret, you know." Anne laughed, and Bailey wanted to live in the sound. "You're right, I'm hopeless. But Eric just told me all about it, and we thought about it a lot together, so now I just have to know, and I have to keep it a secret. Are you good at keeping a secret?" "Yeah, I'm great at keeping a secret," said Bailey. "I don't talk to anyone." "When are you coming back to school?" asked Eric. She crouched on the path and extended a hand towards Bunny, who crept from between Bailey's legs to sniff it. "It's like you said," Bailey said. "I tried to kill myself the day before the first day, so now I get to miss the whole year." Eric screwed his eyes at that, as if it wasn't just the facts. She shot a desperate look at Anne, but her smile was firmly in place. "When do you come back?" Anne asked. "I can't wait for you to come back." Why is she talking like we're friends? I don't understand her at all. Not the happiness, not the friendliness, not the glow that follows her around. "I'm doing the 5th grade next year," Bailey shrugged, "and then I'm moving up to middle school." "You're going to be a year below us?" Eric said. Bailey looked back at him, scratching Bunny under the ears. "Eric." "Oh my gosh," said Anne, "that'll be fun. We'll be like advanced scouts. Eric and I will learn everything, and then we'll give you the answers and the test scores. We'll tell you what teachers are cool. Next year we'll tell you what middle school is like, and you'll be 100% prepared for everything, like in a spy movie." "Everything's a spy movie these days," Eric said. He sounds like he's bored of it, but he's smiling too. I don't understand him either. Sort of a boy, transgender. At least Bunny seems to like him. Slowly, Bailey looked back at Anne, and the smile caught her like a safety net. Why would you do all that spy stuff for me? She asked. Because we're friends, said Anne. Friends. Friends help each other out. Are you good at math, Bailey? Sort of. I'm awful at math, Anne shouted as though it were the best news in the world. So next year, if you get put in the high-level class and I get put in the low-level class, we'll be in the same ones. Oh, said Bailey. I didn't know it worked like that. This is awesome, and we can hang out while Eric is busy in the double advanced class. Anne pointed at Eric as she shouted, and Bailey saw his face turn scarlet before he buried it in Bunny's curly white hair. I don't really have any friends, Bailey said out loud. Anne kept her sunlight smile on. You've got 2 friends at least, she said. That's us, Eric chimed in. Are you sure? Asked Bailey. I feel like 1 or 2 good friends is all you need, Eric said. I get scared by having too many. We've got you, Bailey said. She pulled Bailey into another hug while blonde hair and bright colors wrapped around her ratty frame. Promise. Before they biked away, Anne and Eric each gave Bailey their home phone numbers on sticky notes and made plans to meet in the woods again next week, and each of them fawned over Bunny for a few minutes. And then the pair of them giggled off into the woods and left Bailey standing still behind them. I can still feel Anne's hand on my shoulder, even an hour later when I'm in front of the basement TV. It's like she's still here, holding on to me, telling me we're friends. And I know that I'm better off alone. I know that. But I'm starting to feel like with Bunny and Anne and Eric, I'm not so bad either. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reading, Tom. So as we've seen today from these readings, creative writing has so much power and can take so many diverse forms to describe, investigate, and transform this world. Thank you so much for supporting the IC seniors, and happy Spring Rights.